In the early months of 1918, an unexpected influenza pandemic swept across the globe. According to the reports from various countries, this deadly outbreak claimed nearly 50 million lives worldwide. This same influenza ravaged India as well, leading to the deaths of 13 million people. Our story today takes place in the northern region of Uttarakhand, India, which was also heavily affected by this devastating disease. Uttarakhand lies in the northern part of India, bordering Tibet to the north and Nepal to the east. The local people predominantly follow Hinduism and firmly believe that the waters of the Ganges River are a divine gift from Lord Shiva, capable of purifying the soul. Therefore, whenever a loved one passes away, they carry the deceased to the riverbank for cremation. They let the ashes flow with the Ganges, ensuring that the departed soul finds ultimate peace. During normal times, all deceased individuals would follow this funeral tradition. However, in 1918, a severe influenza pandemic led to a death toll that far exceeded the capacity for conducting Ganges funerals. To prevent further spread of the flu, the locals were afraid to keep the bodies of the deceased while waiting for a proper ceremony. Reluctantly, many villagers in the mountains resorted to placing a piece of charcoal in the mouth of the deceased and then throwing the bodies into remote valleys. These left numerous corpses to accumulate and decompose in these secluded ravines. It was possible that the souls of the deceased, unable to flow into the Ganges and find peace, were restless. A terrifying series of disappearances were brewing. People at the time had no idea how terrifying a monster these piles of corpses would give rise to. Our story today unfolds against this backdrop of such a rampant disaster. Hello everyone, welcome to Cat's Archive. I'm Cat. In June 1918, something very strange occurred in the Indian state of Uttarakhand. People here would mysteriously disappear without a trace. Unlike previous missing person cases, people disappeared in extremely bizarre ways during this event. For instance, in one village, a young boy was playing with his father. The boy turned around to go back home and fetch something. But when he looked back, his father had vanished without a trace. He hadn't even heard a sound. The boy was only away for about 10 seconds, and there were several other people nearby. Yet no one saw how his father disappeared. It was as if his father had been mysteriously swallowed up by the air. On another occasion, a couple was sleeping at home. The next morning, they discovered that the two babies who had been sleeping beside them had vanished. They hadn't even heard a single sound during the night. Typically, disappearances occur outdoors or when someone is alone. However, the strangest aspect of this incident was that every time someone went missing, there were almost always people nearby, yet no one heard or saw anything unusual. Due to the frequent disappearances, rumors began to spread among the locals that it must be the restless spirits of the dead causing these events. This mysterious phenomenon came to be known as the evil spirits of the terraces. From July to August 1918, the local government received an increasing number of missing person reports. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the authorities dispatched patrol officers to investigate these disappearances. The incidents were concentrated in the Rudraprayag area of Uttarakhand. This area is mostly terraced fields with villagers built on the farmland. This layout allowed villagers to oversee the terraces and protect them from wild animals. After conducting investigations, it was found that most of the locations where people went missing had traces of blood, indicating that wild animals might be responsible. In 1907, there had been a severe incident in the Champawat area of India, where a Bengal tiger, known locally as the Calamity, had killed over 400 people. Consequently, the police began to suspect that this series of mysterious disappearances might also be the work of a Bengal tiger. However, the problem was that the village terraces were open fields, with the surrounding mountains almost entirely in view. How could such a large animal like a tiger cause so many people to disappear silently and without a trace? The police found themselves baffled and perplexed by this mystery. One day in 1918, in a village east of Rudraprayag area, two villagers were smoking a hookah in their dimly lit home. After one of them finished smoking, he passed the pipe to his friend beside him, but it suddenly fell to the ground. He was about to scold his friend for not catching it properly when he realized the spot where his friend had been sitting was now empty. Thinking his companion might have stepped outside, the man turned to look at the doorway and was immediately terrified, his hair standing on end. He saw a beast covered in spots biting his friend's neck, and in an instant, it vanished out the door. It was then that the local government finally confirmed that this series of disappearances was likely caused by a leopard attack. Leopards are common large felines in India, and they are much smaller in size compared to tigers. However, these beasts are extremely skilled in stealth and ambush. They can easily hide in narrow crevices that a tiger couldn't fit into. Leopards spend a long time observing their prey's behavior, waiting for the perfect time to strike. And then, they swiftly bite their prey's neck. Once a leopard has its eyes on a target, the prey hardly has any time to struggle before it meets its end. Male leopards typically weigh between 50 and 100 kilograms. Although they are not as heavy as tigers, their strength is in no way inferior. They can effortlessly drag prey that weighs several times more than themselves up into trees. Consequently, any leopard that weighs a slightly larger build can easily hunt humans. Because of the tiger attack 10 years ago that resulted in 400 deaths, India had developed a comprehensive system for tracking and capturing dangerous beasts. Once the patrol officers confirmed that the culprit was a wild animal, they would document the animal's activity routes in the area. Then, they would dispatch specialized hunting teams to eliminate the threat. At first, the hunting team assumed that dealing with a leopard would be easier than handling a tiger. However, they quickly realized just how terrifying their quarry was. Based on the rough locations where people had gone missing, the team soon found some leopard tracks and droppings. A few times, they followed the tracks into a forest, and their hunting dogs began to bark uncontrollably. Everyone understood that the man-eating leopard was likely nearby. But no matter how hard they tracked, they couldn't find the leopard. Unlike tigers, leopards excel at climbing. Their range of movement includes vertical spaces, making it possible for them to hide in any tree or on any wall, ready to launch a sudden attack on unsuspecting people. The most eerie aspect was that the man-eating leopard in Rudraprayag seemed to possess an astonishing level of intelligence. It would evade the hunting dogs and perfectly avoid various traps. This was reminiscent of an old Japanese legend, which said that if an animal ate enough humans, it would start to think like one. It seemed this leopard had acquired a certain level of cunning. Whenever the hunting team tracked it, the footprints would often suddenly stop, as if the leopard was capable of erasing its own tracks. After months of searching, the hunters were no closer to capturing the leopard. This situation embarrassed both the government and the hunting team. As the man-eating leopard remained uncaptured, the local people grew increasingly anxious and fearful. During the pursuit, The terrifying disappearances continued to occur repeatedly. One night, 4 villagers were sleeping in their home, but the next day, one of them, the person sleeping furthest inside, had vanished. The missing individual was a middle-aged woman who was gravely ill due to the influenza. On the night of the incident, no one noticed anything unusual. The leopard likely slipped in through a window crack, skillfully navigated around the numerous porcelain items in the house, and carried off the weakest person in the room. The leopard that couldn't be found during the day would come out at night while people were asleep to prey on them. If it were a tiger, there might be a chance to confront it head-on. However, dealing with this incredibly stealthy leopard was nearly impossible. It moved like a ghost in the shadows, coming and going without a trace, silent and unseen. The hunting team set up some animal traps, but not only did they fail to capture the man-eating leopard, but one of the hunters who went to place the traps also disappeared. Several days later, the body of the missing hunter was found in a tree. The situation had escalated so severely that the local government deployed a military unit to conduct a large-scale sweep of the mountains. They even raised the bounty on the man-eating leopard to an exorbitant amount of 20,000 rupees, which is equivalent to about $390,000 today. Despite these efforts, the leopard remained elusive, and people continued to come up empty-handed. The most terrifying part was that during the army's search, they found many corpses with only one leg or one arm eaten. This indicated that the leopard might have sensed humans were pursuing it, causing it to interrupt its meals multiple times. In severe cases, partially devoured bodies were frequently found throughout the area. This situation had a profoundly negative impact, leading the local people to believe that this was no ordinary animal, but rather a terrifying evil spirit. Fast forward 8 years to the spring of 1926. The government of Uttarakhand invited British hunter Jim Corbett to hunt down the man-eating leopard of Rudraprayag. Jim is an expert on man-eating felines. It was he who, over a decade ago, dealt with the Chambawat tiger and killed the leopard in Benares. Both of these beasts had claimed over 400 human lives and were notorious in India. Before Jim arrived, the hunt for the man-eating leopard in Uttarakhand had been ongoing for 8 years. However, very few people had even seen the leopard, and every year there were still a large number of missing person cases. Nowadays, the government has no idea what to do, so they had to call in experts like Jim. As soon as Jim arrived in Rudraprayag, he could sense something really weird about this place. During the day, the villagers go about their usual work and market activities, but after 8 p.m., the locals imposed a very strict curfew on themselves. Everyone would lock themselves in their homes and not dare to go outside. This man-eating leopard had completely changed the daily routines of the local people. Jim looked into the latest attack. Just a few days ago, a shepherd boy was sleeping in a room with a bunch of goats. The next morning, all the goats were perfectly fine, but the boy had been taken by the leopard. That night, all the windows in the room were locked, and the door was bolted shut. Seeing this, no one could figure out how the leopard did it. Then, Jim spotted a line of claw marks on the door bolt. That's when everyone realized that the leopard had reached through the gap, used its claws to slide the bolt open, and then enter the room. This leopard had figured out how to open doors. By this time, Jim was over 50 years old. Even though he wasn't as strong as he used to be, his understanding of large man-eating cats was second nature to him. Jim didn't choose to track the leopard. Instead, he gathered a bunch of goats and sheep and set up specific traps in various areas. After adjusting his ambush position several times, Jim quickly sensed the presence of the man-eating leopard somewhere around him. Usually, animals that have eaten humans behave differently from their kind, and this leopard's behavior was completely different from other leopards. Near Jim's traps, he discovered a lot of leopard footprints. These prints circled around Jim's position before slowly moving away in another direction. This meant that the man-eating leopard had spotted Jim first, without him even knowing. And throughout the entire time, the leopard's tracks never went near the sheep. It was clear that the leopard wasn't interested in the sheep. It was coming for Jim. The nearby Alaknanda River divided the area where the man-eating leopard appeared into two parts. There were only 3 bridges connecting the two areas. Leopards hate swimming, so Jim had 2 of the bridges closed off and set up a platform on the only remaining bridge. If the leopard tried to cross, they could take it down there. If it didn't cross, at least its range of movement would be reduced. However, after several days of waiting by the bridge, Jim didn't see any sign of the leopard. Guarding the bridge didn't work, so Jim had to come up with a new plan. In a desperate situation, he used the bodies of some victims as bait, setting traps where the leopard might pass. But the leopard cleverly avoided them each time. Jim then coated a sheep with arsenic, tying its mouth to prevent it from leaking the poison, using the sheep as a bait to see if he could poison the man-eating leopard. But the leopard didn't fall for that either, and the plan failed again. The most terrifying part was that not only could Jim not catch the leopard, but he also frequently found its footprints near him. He felt that while he was hunting the man-eating leopard, the leopard might very well be looking for an opportunity to hunt him. As Nietzsche said, when you look into the abyss also looks into you. In March 1926, Jim tied a goat with a bell around its neck to a tree in the area. He and his assistants then moved to a further location, hoping this would lower the leopard's guard. After waiting for almost 4 hours, they suddenly heard the bell ringing loudly. They rushed over, but when they reached the goat's location, it was gone. They searched around but couldn't hear the bell again. Assuming the trap had failed, they began to head back. After a few hundred meters, they suddenly saw the goat's corpse on the path they had come from. Its throat had been bitten through, and the bell around its neck was missing. With an extremely ominous feeling, Jim suddenly thought of something. He instructed his assistants to gather close, and they immediately began moving downhill. Everyone was on edge, and every few meters, Jim would light a match until they reached the nearest village. Early the next morning, Jim found a clear set of leopard footprints along the path they had taken downhill the previous night. The man-eating leopard had turned the tables, using the goat as bait and following them all the way. If Jim hadn't insisted on heading downhill immediately and lighting matches along the way, making the cautious leopard hesitant to attack, they would likely have been dead. In his lifetime, Jim had encountered countless large felines, but even the infamous Champawat tiger wasn't as cunning as this one. From the footprints, it was clear that the man-eating leopard was male and not young. However, it was still very strong, highly intelligent, and capable of observing humans. The most terrifying aspect was that this leopard exhibited a human-like way of thinking, completely unlike any other feline. By mid-April 1926, more than a month had passed, but Jim still hadn't captured this cunning adversary. Jim discussed with the local district officer that the leopard had previously attacked goats, indicating it had an interest in them. They concluded that the only way to shift the leopard's focus back to goats was to make it feel that attacking humans was too difficult. Jim instructed the nearby villagers to reinforce their doors and windows and arrange for people to patrol the village intensively with hunting dogs. Then he once again released a few goats with bells into the mountains. He himself hid on a distant platform. The only option left was to rely on luck to kill the leopard from a distance. If he still couldn't kill it, then even the world's top hunter would have no other options left. The leopard didn't appear in the first few days. After nearly 10 days of waiting, Jim heard the distant and urgent barking of the hunting dogs. His instincts told him that the leopard was nearby. Jim thought his plan had finally worked. But then, to his surprise, he heard the barking getting closer, heading straight towards him. The entire mountain area was pitch black, with only the continuous barking of the dogs breaking the silence. Jim felt his scalp tingle with fear, but he still couldn't determine whether the leopard was coming towards him or going after the goats. In the darkness, only two hunters were left to outwit each other, Jim and the leopard. Jim knew that whether the leopard ran towards him or the goats, this would be the final showdown between two legendary hunters. Tonight, one of them was destined to die. Jim hid in the bushes, drenched in cold sweat. Despite his extensive experience, he could feel his breathing becoming increasingly fast. After that, the mountain was so quiet that only the barking of the dogs could be heard. A few minutes later, the bell on the goat's neck suddenly rang out loud. Jim quickly turned on his flashlight and pointed it towards the goats. This time, he finally saw the man-eating leopard in full view. A large leopard was silently approaching the goat. Jim didn't have time to think and quickly pulled the trigger. With a bang, the leopard's body jerked and then instantly vanished into the woods. Jim approached the area where the goats were and found a pool of blood on the ground, trailing into the woods. Jim realized he had hit the leopard. He followed the blood trail and eventually discovered the dead leopard near a cave hidden by leaves. After hunting the locals for 8 years, the leopard was finally killed by another legendary hunter. With the rapid pace of urbanization, the forested areas have been rapidly shrinking. However, leopard attacks on humans are still not uncommon in India. Leopards and tigers have an 80% overlap in their hunting territories, partly because leopards are driven out by tigers, and partly due to the larger number of leopards. As a result, in India, incidents of leopard attacks on humans far exceed those of tigers, and even surpass the combined total of other carnivorous animals. According to reports, even in modern times from 2000 to 2019, nearly 300 people were attacked by leopards in the Uttarakhand region alone, and 56 man-eating leopards were killed. Leopards can silently break into residents' homes, injure people, and kill household dogs. In areas where leopards and humans frequently intersect, some dog owners even paint leopard spots on their dogs to try to deter attacks. This shows just how much the local people fear leopards. In the Rudraprayag man-eating leopard incident, the official death toll was around 125 people. However, since the leopard would drag people far away to eat, many of the missing were never found, so the actual number might be much higher. After measurement, including the tail, this man-eating leopard was 2.3 meters long and was an old leopard. Its mouth was gray and it had no whiskers on its lips, making its appearance different from that of a typical leopard. Experts speculate that there are two main reasons why leopards might start eating humans. The first is related to the 1918 influenza pandemic in India, which resulted in a large number of deaths in the Uttarakhand region. Leopards are scavengers, and in times of natural food scarcity, they would easily consume the corpses discarded in the mountains. After the pandemic ended, the leopards, having developed a taste for human flesh, might have started hunting humans when they could no longer find the abundant corpses. The second reason is that numerous scars were found on the man-eating leopard, including various gunshot and puncture wounds, most of which had healed. Some of these wounds were clearly over 8 years old, suggesting that the leopard might have started hunting humans as a form of revenge after being attacked. Each time it survived an attempt to kill it, the leopard became smarter. It learned to open doors and use bait to lure hunters, eventually becoming a highly anthropomorphic monster. Regardless of the reason, it is certain that the mutations in this man-eating leopard were definitely related to human activities. In 1936, 200 kilometers south of where the Rudraprayag man-eating leopard was killed, India established a national park named after Jim Corbett. Jim dedicated the rest of his life to the conservation of wildlife. In his book, Jim wrote that the Rudraprayag man-eating leopard was one of the most terrifying animals in India. Bengal tigers might lose their fear of humans after eating them, but leopards become even more cautious after consuming human flesh. Their continuous consumption of humans leads them to constantly learn and evolve, eventually turning into very frightening creatures. It is because the leopard violated human laws that it had to be killed. However, sometimes it is difficult to determine whether nature created the monster or if human actions altered nature to create the monster. And that's the story for today. Remember to follow my channel. I will be releasing a new episode every week. I'm Kat. See you next time.